I felt the sting before I even saw it. The way his behavior shifted, how his eyes darted away whenever he was near me, how the air seemed to thicken with a tension I couldn't place. It was like a subtle crack in the foundation of everything we had built together, one I couldn't ignore anymore. First, I tried to dismiss it. He was busy, stressed, maybe just overwhelmed with work. But then it started to feel different. His phone. The way he kept it close, how he'd answer calls in another room, leave me alone at the dinner table while he stepped out for a quick chat. I noticed the little things. The unread messages that he would scroll past without even a second glance. The faint hum of the phone when a message popped up. His fingers swiping quickly to silence it. I couldn't explain it, but something inside me clenched. I tried to trust him, I really did. But there was this gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. The kind that makes your pulse race and your mind spiral into places it shouldn't go. Then one evening I saw it. We were sitting on the couch, watching TV in that comfortable, familiar silence that used to fill our evenings. He'd been on his phone for a while, not really paying attention. A message came in and I saw the name on the screen, Catherine. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't recognize the name. But it wasn't that, it was how he immediately turned his back to me, his posture stiffening as he tapped something on the screen. And then he left. I sat there, my breath shallow, as he walked out of the room. The silence of the house settled around me, but it felt suffocating. I knew I shouldn't have, but the curiosity, the overwhelming need to understand what was going on was unbearable. I waited until I heard the front door click shut, the sound of his footsteps fading outside. My hand trembled as I reached for his phone, still lying abandoned on the couch. For a moment I thought I'd put it back, that I wouldn't cross this line. But the thought of Catherine, of her name, lingered in my mind like a poison. I couldn't stop myself. Unlocking it was easy enough. He always kept it simple. His messages popped up first and I scrolled, my heart hammering in my chest. There were a lot of texts. Too many. Some were from friends, others from colleagues. But then I saw her name again. Catherine. The messages between them were not casual. They were personal. Intimate. Words that made my stomach twist into tight knots, like I was choking on my own breath. The first message was simple. I can't wait to see you again. My pulse quickened. I scanned through a few more, each one more intimate than the last. Miss you, babe. I love when you touch me like that. You're the only one who knows how to make me feel this good. The texts went on, each one a reminder that my husband, the man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was giving himself to someone else. I felt like the world was falling away beneath me. I had always trusted him. I had always believed that what we had was solid, that nothing could break it. But this was a betrayal. A deep, sickening betrayal. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront him. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the realization that I wasn't ready to face the truth. Or maybe it was because I knew that if I confronted him now, there would be no turning back. So instead, I did something I never thought I would do. I responded. I didn't use my name. I didn't give any clue as to who I was. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, a mix of anger and something darker running through my veins. I couldn't let him get away with it. Not without understanding what had been happening, what kind of person he had become. I typed carefully, my pulse steadying with each letter. I miss you too. When can we see each other again? I hit send. My breath caught as I waited. I was trembling now, but I didn't know if it was from fear or excitement. The message didn't take long to be answered. You know I can't wait to feel you again. Soon, baby, I promise. Just one more day. I read those words, each one sinking deeper into me, twisting the knife of betrayal. And yet, despite the pain, there was a strange sense of power, a dark thrill running through me. I wasn't just the hurt wife anymore. I was someone else now, someone who could play this game too. I was no longer passive, no longer the one waiting in the dark while he slipped away. I was in control, and that feeling, that shift in the power dynamic, felt both empowering and terrifying. Over the next few days, I continued to message Catherine. It was always from the same number, always with the same anonymity. We never spoke of me, never mentioned anything that might give her any hint of who I was. But through the messages, I began to understand her. She wasn't just a fling, a one-time affair. She was someone who had his heart. And I realized that what hurt the most wasn't just his actions. It was how he had lied to me. How he had made me believe I was still his only one. I was deep in it now, tangled in something I never thought I would be part of. I didn't know what I was trying to accomplish anymore. Whether it was revenge or closure, whether I was trying to expose him or simply get a taste of what he had been getting all this time. But one thing was certain. The truth was out there now, and it was clawing its way to the surface. And I wasn't ready to stop. Each message from Catherine felt like a blow to my chest. At first, I was just curious, consumed by the need to understand what was happening, to uncover the extent of his betrayal. But soon it became more than that. It became a twisted game. One where I wasn't just the hurt wife anymore. I was someone who had power, who could manipulate the situation without revealing myself. I had become the silent third party in their relationship, a shadow hovering just outside their secret world. I learned more about Catherine over the next few days. She was clever, confident, and unafraid to speak her mind. In the messages, she often asked about his day, his work, his moods. But she also hinted at more personal matters, things I knew were meant to draw him in, to keep him coming back for more. She wasn't just texting him out of habit. She was weaving herself into his life in a way I hadn't realized. She knew about his likes, his dislikes, his desires. She knew him in ways I hadn't in a long time. And that realization gnawed at me. I felt a strange mixture of anger and something else. Something I didn't expect. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. Though I still felt a need to get back at him, to make him feel the same pain he had inflicted on me. But it was also about understanding why. Why had he done this? Why hadn't he told me? Was I really so blind? Was I so unworthy of his love that he needed someone else to fill the gaps I hadn't even known were there? I began to think about Catherine more than I should have. I imagined her face, her voice, the way she must have looked when she was with him. It was almost as though I could feel her presence through the messages. I knew what she was doing to him, knew the way her words must have seduced him. And the thought twisted something deep inside me. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was a sick curiosity, a need to know her, to know what had made her so irresistible to him. And I hated myself for it. The messages continued, and I found myself responding faster, with more intensity. It wasn't just about gathering information anymore. It was about winning. I wasn't going to let her have him. I wasn't going to let her take what was mine without a fight. But the more I played this game, the more I realized I wasn't the one in control anymore. She was. Catherine had him, in ways I hadn't even thought possible. She wasn't just a lover to him. She was someone who could make him feel things I hadn't made him feel in years. I couldn't stop myself, though. Every time I replied to her, it was like opening a door to a world I couldn't escape from. I started to see how he spoke to her, how different it was from the way he spoke to me. There was a tenderness in his words to her that I hadn't heard in so long. A tenderness I had longed for, had begged for, but never received. And now she was getting it. She was the one who had become his safe place, his escape. I began to wonder if he even remembered me anymore. If he could still see me as the woman he had married. Or was I just someone who had become part of the background, someone who no longer sparked any excitement in him? The more I read, the more I wondered if I had failed him somehow. If I had become too complacent, too predictable. If I had been so focused on our life together, on the routine, that I had forgotten what he needed. But there were moments too where I caught glimpses of his true feelings. Little slips in the messages, moments of vulnerability that made my chest tighten. He would sometimes talk about feeling guilty, about not wanting to hurt me. And then just as quickly, he would pull back, as though he were ashamed of his emotions. Catherine, on the other hand, would be more open, more raw. She would reassure him, tell him that it was okay, that she understood. It made me sick. I was his wife. I was the one who was supposed to comfort him, to be there when he needed someone to lean on. But now she had become his refuge. She was the one he turned to in his darkest moments, while I was left here alone, piecing together the remnants of our broken relationship. I couldn't stop myself from responding to Catherine's messages. It was as if I had become addicted to the secret, to the feeling of being on the edge of something forbidden. Each time I sent a message, I felt a small rush of power, like I was playing a part in a game I never agreed to. It was wrong, so wrong, but I couldn't stop. The words, the emotions, the way they seemed to pull him in, it was intoxicating. It didn't take long for Catherine to respond with something more daring. One evening, after a particularly steamy exchange of texts, she sent me a message that made my blood run cold. "Are you going to tell him?" she asked. My heart skipped a beat. For the first time I realized just how much power she had. She knew. She knew that I was the wife, that I was the one reading these texts, that I was the one who had been hurt. But somehow she didn't seem threatened by it. She didn't even seem concerned. Tell him what? I typed back, my hands trembling. She replied quickly. Tell him that you know about us. About everything. I didn't know what to say. My mind raced, thoughts crashing together in a violent storm. What did she want from me? Did she want me to confront him? Did she want to see if I would give up my marriage for her? The audacity of it took my breath away. But I couldn't back down now. I had crossed too many lines, let the situation go too far. I was in this game now, and there was no turning back. I'm not sure what you think will happen, I typed. But I'm not going to let him go without a fight. Catherine didn't respond right away. For a few moments, the silence between us was deafening. And then when the next message came through, it wasn't from her. It was from him. Where are you? He asked. I felt a surge of panic. He was home. He had come back early. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat there staring at the screen. I could feel my breath catching in my throat. What was I supposed to say? How could I hide this? How could I keep up the facade? The door to the living room creaked open, and I heard his footsteps. My mind raced, the thoughts spinning faster and faster. I hadn't expected him home so soon. He was supposed to be at the office for another hour. I wasn't ready for this confrontation. Not yet. Not when I was so tangled up in the lies in the game I had created. I looked at his phone again, and then, without thinking, I made a decision. I typed one last message to Catherine. I'm not done yet. I hit send, threw his phone onto the couch, and stood up just as he walked in. The air was thick with tension, both of us standing there in the dim light of the hallway. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved. And I knew. This was the moment everything would change. He stood there, frozen for a moment, his eyes flicking from me to the phone I had carelessly discarded on the couch. I could feel the tension in the room, thick and suffocating, pressing down on me with every breath. His gaze lingered for a fraction longer than necessary, as if he could sense something was different, that I knew more than I should. He tried to smile, but it was forced, tight around the edges. I could see through it. His act of nonchalance was unraveling bit by bit. Hey, he said, his voice too casual, too light. You okay? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a slow, deliberate step toward the window, trying to compose myself, trying to figure out how to navigate this, how to keep the game going. My hands were still trembling from the conversation with Catherine, from the twisted pleasure of controlling the situation. I turned toward him, taking in his disheveled appearance. His hair slightly tousled, his shirt untucked, as though he had rushed in from somewhere. The contrast between the man standing in front of me now and the one I thought I knew was too stark. I'm fine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words came out more hollow than I intended. A quietness that seemed to pull us both into an uncomfortable space. He walked closer, then stopped just short of me. You sure? You've been acting different. His words trailed off as if he regretted them the moment they left his lips. He couldn't quite place it. He couldn't figure out why I was looking at him the way I was, like I was seeing through him, dissecting his every move, every word. I've just been thinking, I said, forcing my voice to steady. You've been busy lately, haven't you? I wasn't sure why I said it like that, as though I were talking about a work project or a hobby. But the words hung in the air like a challenge, daring him to answer without fully understanding what I was implying. He shifted his weight, a nervous habit that I hadn't seen in him in years. His eyes flickered, unable to meet mine for more than a second. I've been working late. You know that. Yeah. I nodded, still watching him carefully. You've been working late. And talking on the phone a lot. A lot more than usual. His expression faltered just briefly, like he hadn't expected me to say it so directly. He took a deep breath, his gaze now searching mine, trying to gauge if I knew everything. But he couldn't tell. Not yet. Work stuff, he said, forcing a chuckle. You know how it is. I'm sorry if I've been distracted. I didn't say anything at first. I just let the silence stretch between us. As I continued to stare at him, my mind working through everything I had just uncovered. I couldn't let it slip. I couldn't show him how much I knew, how deeply his betrayal had cut. Instead, I simply gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if accepting his excuse, as if buying into the lie for just a moment longer. But as he stepped closer, as his hand reached out, almost instinctively, to touch my arm, I felt a sudden surge of cold. My skin prickled. I could still feel Catherine's presence in the air, still feel the echoes of her texts, her desire for him. She had touched him in ways I hadn't in so long. She had made him feel things I no longer could, or didn't know how to anymore. "Hey, what's going on with you?" His voice softened, the concern in his tone now tinged with a nervous edge, like he wasn't sure if he was on solid ground anymore. "I know I haven't been around much, but I'm here now." For a second I almost believed him. Almost. But then I remembered her messages, the things I had seen, the way he had responded to her with such tenderness. He wasn't just here physically. He had checked out emotionally long before now. He had found something with her that he couldn't find in me. And the thought of that, of him being so distant while pretending everything was fine, ignited something cold and sharp inside me. I stepped back, breaking the fragile moment of connection. "I think we need to talk," I said, my voice firmer now, colder. He blinked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "About what?" "About everything." I could feel the weight of those words settle in the room, like they were too heavy for him to ignore. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing him. I needed to say it now, to rip the veil off, to pull the curtain back on everything he had been hiding. "I know about Catherine," I said, and the words cut through the air like a blade. For a long moment he didn't move. His face drained of color. His lips parted as if he couldn't find the words. His eyes flicked to the phone on the couch, to the spot where it had been resting before. I saw the realization hit him like a punch in the gut. "You," he started, but I wasn't done. "You've been texting her, haven't you? All those messages. All those late-night calls." My voice grew louder, firmer. "You think I wouldn't find out? You think I wouldn't notice?" His jaw clenched. He was trying to hold himself together to maintain some semblance of control. But I could see it now, the cracks in his facade, the guilt in his eyes, the way his body stiffened. It was all there. "Listen," he said, finally managing to speak, though his voice was shaky. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way. It's just been complicated." Complicated. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know what's been going on? You think I didn't see the way you've been acting? The way you've been slipping away from me?" He opened his mouth again, but I wasn't about to let him talk his way out of this. Not now. Not after everything. "I've seen the messages, Jason," I said, my voice cold, harder than I ever intended. "I've read every single one of them. I've read how you talk to her, how she makes you feel. I've read how much you miss her, how you love when she touches you, how you're planning your next meeting." I felt sick. And yet there was something else. Something that burned in the pit of my stomach, something that felt almost like triumph. The power I had over him, the way his face twisted in shame, the way he stammered as if trying to come up with some excuse that wouldn't sound like a lie. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was a mistake. I'm sorry. I swear. I never wanted to hurt you." But his apology felt hollow. It felt too late. The damage was done. The truth had come to light, and it was impossible to ignore it now. I couldn't stop myself anymore. I wanted to make him feel everything I had felt. I wanted him to understand the pain of betrayal, to realize the weight of what he had done. But I couldn't just shout at him, couldn't just scream and demand answers. I had already stepped into a world of manipulation and lies, and now I was going to take it further. "You say you're sorry, but it doesn't change anything," I said, my voice still icy. "You've crossed the line, Jason, and I'm not going to let you just walk away from it." His face faltered, and I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew deep down that there was no going back now. "Please," he begged. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." But it was too late for apologies. The betrayal had already taken root, and I wasn't going to let it go without making him understand exactly what he had done. I stood there, breathing heavily, my mind racing with a mix of anger, betrayal, and something deeper. Something I hadn't expected. Power. For the first time in years, I had the upper hand. He was the one pleading now, not the other way around. It was like the whole world had shifted, and I was no longer the woman quietly suffering in silence, waiting for him to come home and pretending everything was okay. I had him right where I wanted him, vulnerable, exposed, and unsure of what came next. I watched as his face flickered with emotions. Guilt, regret, and something else, fear. Fear that I would leave him, that everything he had carefully constructed with Catherine would come crashing down. He had been playing a dangerous game, but now the stakes were higher than he ever could have imagined. He had no idea how to get out of this, and he was trapped by his own lies. I could feel the power shift in the air, almost like a physical weight. He took a step toward me, his eyes desperate, his voice pleading again. You don't have to do this. You don't have to destroy everything because of one mistake. Please. His words were an attempt to appeal to my emotions, to remind me of the years we'd spent together. But they felt hollow now. Empty. The words no longer had the power to make me soften, to make me forgive him the way I used to. Because this wasn't just one mistake. This was years of him slipping away. Years of neglect. Years of me quietly suffering in a marriage that had turned into a charade. And now it was all out in the open, and I wasn't going to let him slip back into his comfortable life without consequences. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was about to happen. Do you really think it's just one mistake? Do you really think I can just forget the months of lies, the secret phone calls, the way you've been slipping away from me piece by piece? You don't get to play the victim now, Jason. You've made your choices. His face twisted in pain, and I could see the weight of my words hitting him. But it wasn't enough. I wasn't done yet. He needed to feel every ounce of the heartbreak he had caused me. He needed to understand the depth of his betrayal in a way that no apology could fix. And that's when I remembered Catherine. Her name was like a sharp knife twisting in my gut. The way she had written those messages, the way she had seduced him without even being there. She had taken what was mine, what I had worked so hard for. But I could use her now. I could make her part of this too. You know, I talked to Catherine, I said casually, watching his face freeze as the words sunk in. His body went rigid and his eyes widened, panic spreading across his face like wildfire. What? You talked to her? I nodded slowly, savoring the way his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Yes, Jason. I've been talking to her. And you know what? She doesn't feel bad for you. She's not sorry for what she's done. She's not even sorry she's been with you. She thinks it's all fun. The color drained from his face as he staggered backward, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. But there was no escape. Not now. You're lying, he said, his voice shaking. You're just trying to make this worse. You don't know anything about her. I know everything, I interrupted, my voice growing colder with every word. I know exactly what she's been telling you. How she makes you feel better about yourself. How she takes care of you when I can't. How she makes you feel alive again, right? Is that what you wanted? To feel desired, to feel wanted? Because I haven't made you feel that way in a while. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like he was about to collapse, as if the weight of what he had done was finally crashing down on him all at once. But I wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. I needed him to understand that this wasn't just about Catherine, it was about us. You think I don't know what you're really after? That you can just replace me with her and pretend it doesn't matter? Well, it does matter, Jason. It matters to me. It matters to this marriage. It matters to everything you've built. I could feel my anger rising with each word, each accusation. It felt like I had been holding on to this for so long. And now it was finally spilling out, pouring over him like a flood he couldn't outrun. You've been so selfish, I said, my voice low and venomous. So wrapped up in your own needs, your own desires that you forgot about me. You forgot about the woman you promised to love, to care for. You forgot about us. And now you want me to just forgive you because you're sorry? Because you feel bad. I shook my head slowly, my chest tight with emotion. It's too late for that. It's too late for apologies that don't mean anything. He stepped toward me again, this time more cautiously, his voice pleading once more. Please listen to me. I made a mistake, okay? I know I did. I've been stupid. But I don't want to lose you. I can't lose you. Please just let me explain. I met his gaze without flinching. You had your chance to explain. You chose her over me. You chose her over us. And now you want me to fix this? You think you can just come back, say a few words, and everything will go back to normal?" He fell silent again, his face contorted with regret. There was no anger left in him, only fear. Fear of losing me, fear of facing the consequences of his actions. And for the first time in so long I realized something. He was scared. Not of losing Catherine, but of losing everything he had with me. The life we had built, the stability, the comfort of knowing I would always be there, even when he made mistakes. But that was the problem. He had taken me for granted. He had assumed I would always be there, no matter how far he strayed. And now as I looked at him, I knew I couldn't give him that security anymore. Not after everything. Not after everything he had done. I let the silence hang between us for a long time, letting him stew in his own regret. But there was more to be done. More than just exposing his lies. I needed to make sure this was clear. He wasn't going to get away with this. "Jason," I said, my voice cold again. "I've been thinking about all this. And I realized something important. You want forgiveness. You want me to take you back. But that's not how this works. You don't get to just walk back into my life because you're sorry. You don't get to erase what you've done just because you're uncomfortable with the consequences." He looked at me, his face a mixture of fear and disbelief. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," I began, taking a step toward him, my voice low and deliberate, "that I'm not going to save you. I'm not going to make this right. You've already made your choices, and now you have to live with them." His face crumbled, and I could see the raw vulnerability in his eyes. But I wasn't going to let it sway me. I wasn't going to be weak. Not again. "I'm done, Jason," I said, my voice firm. "I'm done with all of it. With you, with her, with everything. I need to figure out what I want now. Not you. Not us." The words hung in the air, final, unrelenting. He stood there, silent, staring at me as if trying to understand what I was really saying. But there was no understanding left. There was only the silence between us. The silence that had taken the place of the love we once shared. And in that silence I knew I had made the right decision. The air between us felt like it was charged with a kind of weight I couldn't escape. Jason stood there, his shoulders slumped, his face pale, almost as if he were seeing me for the first time. His eyes darted around, searching for something. An excuse, an answer. Anything that would restore the balance we once had. But it was too late for that. The damage had been done, and nothing could undo the pain, the betrayal, the way I felt like a fool for ever believing in his promises. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please don't do this. Don't leave me. I can't lose you." I wanted to laugh, but there was no humor in it. No part of me found his desperation funny. I wasn't sure what it was, but the sadness in his voice sounded less like regret and more like someone who was terrified of facing the consequences of his own actions. He wasn't begging because he loved me. He was begging because he feared being alone. He feared losing the comfort of the life we had shared. One built on convenience and false promises. "You should have thought about that before," I said quietly, my voice steady but cold. "Before you decided to throw it all away for her." He closed his eyes for a moment, his hand reaching out as if to touch me, but I took a step back, putting distance between us. There was a tremor in his hand as it dropped to his side. He was realizing slowly but surely that I wasn't the same woman he had married. That I wasn't the woman who would forgive him just because he apologized. I wasn't the woman who would let him come crawling back with empty words. "I never meant for it to be like this," he said again, his voice softer now, tinged with the unmistakable hint of a man who was running out of options. "I swear to God I didn't. I was just lost, I guess. Catherine." She made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. "It's not you, okay? It's not you. You're amazing. You're everything I ever wanted. I shook my head, cutting him off. "Stop. Just stop. You don't get to do this. You don't get to pull me back in with lies and more excuses. I've heard it all before. And I'm done." His face twisted in anguish, his eyes brimming with tears. But I didn't flinch. I didn't feel the need to console him anymore. In fact, the tears on his face felt like salt in an open wound. Every drop, every sob, only reminded me of how deeply he had hurt me, how much he had taken for granted. He had hurt me, and now he wanted me to soothe his pain? No, I wouldn't be that woman again. Please don't do this, he begged again, taking a step forward, desperate now, his voice cracking on every word. I love you. I need you. You're the one I want. For a moment I almost believed him. I almost let myself be swayed by the desperation in his voice, the pleading look in his eyes. But then I thought of Catherine again. I thought of all the times he had looked at me with that same expression, only to turn his attention to her when he thought I wasn't looking. I thought of the countless nights I had spent alone, wondering where he was, who he was with, what he was doing. I thought of the messages on his phone, the ones he had hidden, the ones I had read, every word a stark reminder of his betrayal. I couldn't erase it. I couldn't pretend it didn't happen. I looked at him one last time and I felt nothing. There was no love, no compassion, no forgiveness left in me. There was only cold, bitter resolve. I don't believe you anymore, I said, my voice unwavering like stone. I can't. And I won't let you drag me back into this mess you've created. You don't get to make me feel guilty for being hurt. You don't get to make me the bad guy here. Jason stood there, his face crumpling as the reality of what I was saying hit him. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. For a long moment he just stood there, staring at me like he was waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. I couldn't. And then he collapsed onto the couch, his hands buried in his face as the tears finally began to fall. I had expected him to try harder, to fight more, but I suppose he was done fighting. At least in that moment he was. I watched him for a while, my heart heavy with a sorrow I couldn't fully process. I didn't know what to feel anymore. I had always told myself that I would never let anyone treat me like this. That if my marriage was ever threatened, I would walk away. But now that I was standing at the edge, facing the reality of losing him for good, I realized I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I wasn't sure what came next. I wanted to leave. I wanted to walk out of that door and never look back, to never have to deal with him or his lies again. But as I turned to walk away, something in me stopped. Maybe it was the way he was sobbing, the rawness of it, the desperation. Or maybe it was the part of me that still wanted to believe in us. But I didn't turn back. I couldn't. You'll be fine, Jason, I said, my voice softer now, but still firm. You'll figure it out. You always do. But don't think for a second that I'm going to stick around and fix this for you. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. I turned toward the door, my hand on the knob, but before I could leave, I heard him whisper something barely audible, his voice thick with tears. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But it didn't matter. The words no longer had the power to undo the damage. They couldn't erase the truth. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, the cool air washing over me. A sharp contrast to the suffocating tension that had filled the room just moments before. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because if I did, I knew I'd be tempted to stay. And I couldn't do that to myself. Not anymore. It was over. The door closed behind me with a soft click, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. For a moment I just stood there, staring at the blank wall in front of me, my chest rising and falling with shallow, uneven breaths. My heart was pounding and my hands felt cold, but there was a strange clarity settling over me. I had done it. I had walked away. After everything, the lies, the betrayal, the gut-wrenching pain, I had finally made the choice to put myself first. It should have felt liberating. It should have felt like victory. But all I felt was a dull, empty ache. I descended the stairs slowly, my feet moving on autopilot as my mind replayed every word of our argument, every tear in Jason's eyes, every ounce of regret that had poured out of him. Was it real? Was any of it real? Or was he just sorry because he got caught, because his carefully constructed double life had finally crumbled around him? I wanted to believe that part of him still cared, that the love we had shared wasn't entirely gone, but the evidence said otherwise. His actions, his choices, they had spoken louder than any apology ever could. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I paused on the front steps, staring out at the quiet street. The neighborhood was still, the soft glow of porch lights and the hum of distant traffic the only signs of life. It felt surreal standing there alone, the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on me like a physical force. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to block out the chill, but it was no use. The cold was inside me now, deeper than the night air could ever reach. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out with trembling hands. For a moment I thought it might be Jason, sending one last desperate plea. But when I looked at the screen my stomach twisted. It was Catherine. Her name glared at me like a taunt, a reminder of everything I had just walked away from, everything she had taken from me. My thumb hovered over the screen, debating whether to open the message or delete it without reading. But the pull of curiosity was too strong. I tapped the notification, and her words appeared. "Is he with you now? Did he tell you the truth?" The nerve of her. Sending me a message like this after everything. My hands clenched around the phone, my jaw tightening as a fresh wave of anger surged through me. Who was she to ask me anything? Who was she to demand answers from me after inserting herself into my life, my marriage, and tearing it apart? For a moment I wanted to scream, to throw the phone as far as I could and never look at it again. But instead I started typing. "You've already done enough. Don't pretend you care what happens now." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, the words sharp and final. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen, waiting to see if she would reply. Part of me hoped she wouldn't. Part of me hoped she'd take the hint and leave me alone, let me pick up the pieces of my life in peace. But Catherine wasn't the type to let things go. Her response came almost immediately. "I do care. More than you know." I stared at her words, my mind racing. Was this some kind of twisted game to her? Did she think she could manipulate me the way she had manipulated Jason? Or was there something else? Some part of her that genuinely felt remorse for what she had done? I didn't know, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. But the part of me that had been consumed by this nightmare for so long couldn't let it go. "What do you want from me?" I typed back, the anger simmering beneath my words. "Haven't you done enough already?" Her response took longer this time, and when it came it caught me off guard. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know it would get this far." My breath caught as I read her words. They sounded sincere, almost apologetic, but I couldn't trust them. Not after everything. Not when she had willingly entered into a relationship with a married man, knowing full well the damage it could cause. I wanted to believe she felt guilty, that she was capable of regret, but her actions had spoken louder than any apology ever could. "You knew exactly what you were doing." I typed, my fingers shaking. "Don't pretend you're innocent in this." Her reply came quickly, as if she had been waiting for me to say it. "I'm not pretending. I know I messed up. I know I've hurt you. But he made me feel like I mattered. Like I was special. And I believed him." My chest tightened at her words, the raw honesty in them cutting deeper than I expected. I could see it now, the cracks in her facade, the vulnerability she had tried to hide behind her confident messages and bold actions. She was human just like me, caught in the same web of lies that Jason had spun. But that didn't excuse what she had done. Didn't make it okay. Did it ever occur to you that you were destroying someone else's life? I asked, my anger flaring again. Did you ever think about me, about what I would feel? There was a long pause before she replied. And when her message finally appeared, it was short but heavy with meaning. "I thought he was unhappy. I thought I was helping him. Helping him." The words made me sick. As if she had convinced herself that what she was doing was noble, that she was saving him from a life he didn't want. But the reality was far uglier. She wasn't helping him. She was helping herself. Helping herself to something that wasn't hers, to someone who had made promises to me, not her. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The weight of everything was too much, and I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, hot and relentless. I didn't want to cry, didn't want to let her see how much she had hurt me, but the pain was overwhelming. I tucked my phone back into my pocket and started walking, my steps slow and aimless. I needed air, space, anything to clear my mind. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement as I walked, the cold night air biting at my skin. My thoughts were a whirlwind, spinning out of control, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of it all. Jason's betrayal, Catherine's messages, my own choices. It was all too much. I felt like I was drowning, caught in a storm I couldn't escape. But as I walked, something inside me shifted. The tears dried on my cheeks, and the coldness in my chest began to harden into something else, resolve. I couldn't let this break me. I couldn't let Jason and Catherine's actions define me. I had to find a way forward, a way to rebuild my life on my own terms. And as I took another step, the first faint glimmer of strength began to shine through the darkness. I walked aimlessly, the sound of my boots on the pavement echoing through the quiet night. My mind was a blur of emotions, but one thought persisted. I need to take control of this. I can't let it swallow me whole. Each step I took felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of my own thoughts was pushing me down. But the further I walked, the more I realized how much I needed this moment alone. The silence, the emptiness of the night, offered me something Jason and Catherine had denied me for so long: space to breathe, space to think. My phone buzzed again, pulling me from my thoughts. I froze in place, heart hammering in my chest as I pulled it out, not surprised to see Jason's name lighting up the screen. I hesitated. For a brief, fleeting moment, I considered ignoring it. I had already said everything I needed to say, and yet some twisted part of me wanted to know if he had more to say. If he could somehow find the right words to make everything okay. But then I thought about Catherine again, her message from earlier, her words that felt like an open wound, and the anger surged back in full force. I didn't answer. Instead, I read the text that had just come through. I'm sorry, I can't let you go like this. Please, let's talk. Please. His words felt like a punch to the stomach. Let's talk? The audacity. As if talking would change anything. As if words alone could undo the betrayal, the lies, the years of marriage that now seemed hollow in my mind. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to fix anything. He just didn't want to face the mess he had created. And now he was clutching at straws, trying to salvage what he had thrown away. I wanted to throw the phone away, to crush it underfoot until there was nothing left of it.